Betty Lindsay's world shattered in 48 hours. Her father's gambling debt put her on a flight to Seoul, forced into marriage with 2 Korean Mafia bosses. Identical twins who made one thing brutally clear: there's no choosing between them. She belongs to both, equally, completely. Now she's trapped between Jae-min's dangerous control and Jae-won's devastating tenderness, learning that sometimes the cage becomes the only place you feel free. Before we begin, besties, please don't forget to like and subscribe. This is your only way of supporting us, as we also promise to bring you interesting and hooking stories every single day. Betty's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She sat in the back of a Bentley that probably cost more than her entire Southside Chicago neighborhood, watching Seoul's glittering skyline pass by through tinted windows. 24 hours ago, she'd been serving tables at the diner, helping her father stay afloat. Now she was being driven to meet the men she'd been sold to. Betty's world ended on a Tuesday, in the cramped Chicago apartment that smelled like her father's cigarettes and broken promises. Bradley Ross sat at their kitchen table, hands shaking so violently the whiskey sloshed from his glass, and told his daughter he'd sold her to save his own worthless life. "They were going to kill me, Betty." His voice cracked. "You don't understand what these people are capable of." Through the water-stained window, she could see them. 3 men in dark suits leaning against a black sedan, watching their building like vultures circling carrion. Her father pushed a document across the table, official stamps bleeding red across white paper. His signature at the bottom looked like a death sentence. "His debt or his daughter?" Betty read aloud, her voice hollow. "You chose yourself." "I chose life." Bradley grabbed her wrist. "They're powerful men, baby. Rich beyond anything we can imagine. You'll be taken care of. I'll be property." She yanked free, but the men were already climbing the stairs. The drugged flight to Seoul existed only in fragments. The prick of a needle, the hum of engines, hands catching her when she stumbled. She woke in a car threading through neon-bright streets, skyscrapers piercing clouds like glass daggers. Her mouth tasted like copper and regret. The private terminal gleamed with obscene wealth. 2 men waited by a black Mercedes, and Betty's drugged mind struggled to process them. Identical faces, but opposite energies. One stood military straight, dark suit immaculate, eyes calculating her worth like she was livestock at auction. The other leaned against the car, designer clothes worn with casual indifference, watching her with unsettling focus. "Jae-min," the rigid one introduced himself. His English carried barely a trace of accent. "My brother, Jae-won." No warmth, no pretense of courtesy, just ownership. The penthouse occupied 3 floors of Seoul's most exclusive tower, marble and glass and security cameras in every corner, guards stationed at elevators, windows that didn't open. Betty cataloged every detail with desperate precision. Exits blocked, phones removed, even the bathroom had an attendant. "You understand your situation?" Jae-min stood too close, invading space she no longer had rights to. "I understand. I was trafficked." Betty's defiance felt paper-thin against his absolute certainty. "You understand your father's debt is paid." He circled her slowly. "And you belong to us now." Jae-won appeared with water, the first kindness she'd been shown. His eyes read her terror with uncomfortable accuracy. "Drink. The drugs leave you dehydrated." That night, they led her to a bedroom larger than her entire Chicago apartment. The bed could sleep 5. Jae-min's command left no room for negotiation. "You'll sleep here, between us. Tonight, no discussion." Betty lay rigid in her clothes, body screaming with tension, mind racing through impossible escape plans. The twins settled on either side, Jae-min's presence a wall of control, Jae-won's breathing steady and watchful. When Jae-min's hand settled on her hip with possessive certainty, Betty stopped breathing. "Don't run," he whispered against her hair. "We always find what belongs to us." The morning light cut through the penthouse windows like an accusation. Betty sat rigid on the leather sofa where she'd spent the entire night. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, her eyes burning from refusing to close them. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant accepting this was real. "You need to eat." Jae-won's voice came from the kitchen, softer than his brother's bark of command. Betty said nothing. Her stomach had stopped growling hours ago, replaced by a hollow ache she welcomed. Hunger was something she could control. The smell hit her first: garlic, sesame oil, something savory and complex that made her mouth water traitorously. Jae-won appeared with a steaming bowl, setting it on the coffee table before her. "Kongnamul guk, bean sprout soup. My grandmother made it when things were difficult." She stared at the bowl, hating how her body leaned toward it involuntarily. "The ginger settles anxiety," he continued quietly, sitting across from her. "The garlic gives you strength to face what comes next." Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon. The first taste broke something inside her. Warmth spreading through her chest, her body betraying her mind's resistance. She ate despite herself, despite everything. Jae-min watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "Now that you're functional, let's establish rules. You have freedom within these walls. Guards patrol outside, your passport is secured, don't make this harder than it needs to be." That night, desperation drove her to the elevator. She made it to the lobby before hands closed around her arms, not rough, but immovable. Back upstairs, she braced for the hit, the punishment, the violence she'd been expecting since this nightmare began. Instead, Jae-won asked, "Do you want to survive us, or do you want to understand us?" The question cracked something open. Why me? The words tore from her throat. Why specifically me? Jae-min's answer came with brutal efficiency. "Your father signed you over to clear his debts. We needed an American connection for business legitimacy. You were convenient." His honesty, cold and sharp as a blade, somehow steadied her more than false comfort ever could. At least she knew where she stood. Days blurred into weeks. She learned their patterns. Jae-won's morning coffee ritual. Jae-min's late-night phone calls in Korean. She watched them the way prey studies predators, learning to differentiate between danger and merely dangerous. 3 weeks in, Betty laughed at Jae-won's dry observation about their accountant. The sound shocked all three of them. Jae-min's eyes darkened with something dangerous. "Do that again," he commanded. She couldn't. The shift happened on a Tuesday morning when Betty stopped pacing and started watching. Jae-won was reviewing shipping manifests at the dining table, his brow furrowed in concentration. She'd spent 2 weeks memorizing his tells, the way he tapped his pen twice before making a decision, how his left hand always reached for coffee when numbers weren't adding up. She knew him now in ways that terrified her. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "You're interesting." His pen stilled. Those dark eyes found hers, searching. "May I kiss you?" The question hung between them like suspended breath. Betty's heart hammered against her ribs as she nodded, unable to speak. Jae-won stood slowly, giving her time to change her mind, time to run. She didn't move. His hand cupped her jaw with devastating gentleness, his lips brushing hers in a question that tasted like possibility. She kissed him back. The realization hit her mid-kiss. She'd wanted this. Not Stockholm Syndrome, not survival. Genuine wanting. "Well," Jae-min's voice cut through the moment like silk over steel. He stood in the doorway, tie loosened, eyes burning. Finally. He crossed to them in 3 strides, no permission asked, no hesitation given. Where Jae-won's kiss had been a question, Jae-min's was an answer, demanding, consuming, a forest fire that devoured everything it touched. Betty gasped against his mouth, fingers clutching his shirt for balance. That night, both twins. Complete surrender. Betty chose participation over resistance, desire over fear. Morning found her tangled in silk sheets between them, sunlight cutting across bare skin. She waited for regret that never came. Instead, peace. Terrifying, inexplicable peace. A new rhythm emerged. Mornings belonged to Jae-won, coffee in bed, gentle touches, conversations about poetry and philosophy. Evenings were Jae-min's domain, wine-dark intensity, passionate debates, desire that left her breathless. Days blurred into weeks. 6 weeks in, Betty caught her reflection laughing at something Jae-won said. The woman, staring back, looked happy. Genuinely, impossibly happy. "What does that make me?" she whispered to her reflection. 2 months of fever dreams and privilege, silk sheets and stolen moments. Then Jae-min placed cold metal in her palm during a tense business meeting. A gun, compact and lethal. "Learn to use it," he commanded, his expression granite hard. "This life has enemies." The words hit her like ice water. She wasn't their captive anymore. She was their weakness, their vulnerability, the thing enemies would target to destroy them. And somehow, that changed everything. Betty slammed her hand on the desk between them. "Stop protecting me from your world and teach me to survive in it." Jae-min's jaw tightened. Jae-won's eyes narrowed. She'd interrupted their morning briefing, still wearing yesterday's clothes because she'd spent the night reading financial reports she'd stolen from Jae-min's office. "You want to keep me here?" Betty continued. "Fine, but I won't be ignorant. I won't be decoration. Teach me." The twins exchanged that maddening silent communication. Then Jae-min pulled out a chair. "Sit." The education began immediately. Jae-min taught her financial structures, how legitimate businesses masked money flow, how international connections created untraceable networks. He was patient, methodical, answering every question with precision that made her feel like she was learning a new language. Jae-won's lessons were different. He taught her to read micro-expressions, detect deception in body language, identify threats before they materialized. Where Jae-min dealt in numbers and systems, Jae-won dealt in human nature and survival. Betty absorbed everything. More than that, she saw patterns they missed. At her first business meeting, she sat silent in the corner as requested, the observer who was really decoration. But when a supposed ally proposed a shipping route, Betty noticed the hesitation in his eyes when he mentioned Jakarta. After the meeting, she told Jae-won. He investigated. The route was a Yakuza trap. The next week, Betty suggested restructuring their logistics network. Jae-min initially dismissed it, then ran the numbers. Her system would save them $8 million annually. "She's not decoration," Jae-won said quietly, watching her explain supply chain optimization to their accountant. "She's a weapon." But with competence came confusion. Betty loved Jae-min like fire, intense, consuming, the kind of heat that burned away everything else. She loved Jae-won like water, essential, constant, the steady current that kept her grounded. Different intensities, different needs. "I'm betraying one of them," she confessed to Mrs. Park, her mother's old friend who still visited. "I love them differently." Mrs. Park smiled sadly. "The Choi twins don't love separately, child. They love as one unit. You're not dividing anything, you're multiplying it. But what if..." the window exploded. Glass rained down as a bullet embedded itself in the wall behind Betty's head. Attached was a note with her name written in blood. The twins went cold. Betty had never seen them like this. Synchronized, lethal, unified in a way that made her previous fear seem like affection. "Pack a bag," Jae-min ordered, his voice arctic. "We're going to war." The penthouse became a fortress overnight. Guards at every entrance, surveillance feeds covering every angle, and Betty caught in the middle of it all. She watched Jae-min coordinate security from his office, while Jae-won paced the living room like a caged animal, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders in rapid Korean. 72 hours, they said. Maybe less if the threat was neutralized. Betty felt the walls closing in. Different penthouse, different locks, but the same suffocating feeling, trapped, powerless, watched. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city below, remembering her apartment's cracked walls and broken lock that never quite latched right. "We need groceries," she said on day 2. "Real food, not whatever's in the freezer." "Already arranged," Jae-min replied without looking up from his laptop. "I'll go with the supply run," Jae-won offered, shrugging into his jacket. Betty grabbed her coat. "So will I." The garage was supposed to be secure. The loading area was supposed to be clear. Betty was halfway to the SUV when she saw the man emerge from behind a concrete pillar, gun rising. Everything slowed down. The man's finger on the trigger. Her feet frozen to the ground. And Jae-won, God Jae-won, throwing himself in front of her as the shot cracked through the garage. He hit the ground hard, blood spreading across his shoulder. Betty couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Guards swarmed the shooter while she dropped to her knees beside Jae-won, pressing her hands against the wound, feeling his blood hot and slick between her fingers. "Don't you dare," she whispered, voice breaking. "Don't you fucking dare leave me." His eyes found hers, unfocused but alive. Not going anywhere. The hospital was sterile and cold. Betty sat in the surgical waiting room, still wearing his blood, while Jae-min held her so tightly she could barely breathe. She didn't pull away. "I can't lose him," she said into Jae-min's chest. "I can't lose either of you. I need you both." His hand tightened in her hair. "Then you understand why we'll burn down anyone who threatens you." 2 hours later, in a basement she'd never known existed beneath their building, Betty watched Jae-min press a gun to the traitor's temple, the guard who'd leaked their location, and pull the trigger without hesitation. She should have run, should have screamed, should have felt horror. Instead, she felt cold, crystalline clarity. This was who they were. Violence and devotion, wrapped together so tightly you couldn't separate them. Loving them meant accepting all of it, the blood and the bullets, the empire and the execution. When her father called from Chicago, voice shaking with new debts and old desperation, Betty looked at both twins. "No," she said, and hung up. She'd chosen her family. Betty stood in the kitchen of the penthouse, phone pressed to her ear, listening to her father's slurred voice beg for money. Again. Bradley Ross had fallen deeper than before, gambling debts that would break him this time, threats from people who didn't make empty promises. "Just ask them," he pleaded. "They're billionaires. It's pocket change to them." Her stomach turned. 6 months ago, she would have felt obligated. 6 months ago, she was still that girl who believed blood meant something. "You sold me to them," she said quietly. "Like I was property. Why would I help you now?" "I'm your father." Bradley's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "I'm your blood. They're your captors, Betty. You're confused. They've manipulated you into thinking. They gave me choice. Betty interrupted, her voice steady. "You took it away." The silence on the other end felt heavy. Then came the manipulation she knew would follow. "So, you'll let your own father die? For 2 men who bought you?" Betty closed her eyes. She thought about Jae-min teaching her to stand up for herself. Jae-won's patience as she learned to trust. The way they'd slowly transformed from captors to something else. Something that felt more like family than Bradley ever had. "I'll ask them to pay your debt," she said finally. "But after that, you don't contact me again, ever." She found the twins in Jaemin's study. When she explained, Jae-min leaned back in his chair, studying her with those sharp eyes. "You're choosing us over him, permanently." Jae-won's concern was softer. "Are you sure? You can't undo this." Betty met their gazes, certain in a way she'd never been before. "He's not my family anymore. You are." The twins exchanged a look, something passing between them that felt like respect, like recognition. They paid Bradley's debt that afternoon. Betty made the final call herself, her voice clear and unwavering. "Your debt is paid. Don't contact me again." She hung up before he could respond. That night, lying between them, Betty felt the weight lift. She wasn't here because of debt anymore. Wasn't here because she had no choice. She was here because somewhere in the chaos, she'd found where she belonged. 6 weeks later, Betty stood in the bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test. She didn't know which twin was the father. She didn't care. This child belonged to all 3 of them. Betty's hands trembled as she held the pregnancy test, positive lines staring back at her like twin accusations. She'd known for days, felt the change in her body, but seeing it confirmed made everything real. That evening, she stood in the penthouse living room with both twins present, their identical faces reflecting identical confusion at her serious tone. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, "and I don't know which of you is the father." The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Jae moved first, pulling her into his arms while Min's hand found her back, both of them creating a protective circle around her. No jealousy, no territorial claims, just immediate unified joy that made her throat tight. "We're both the father," Min said quietly. "That's how this works." But Betty stepped back, her business degree brain already calculating futures and risks. "No, we're not raising a child in the criminal world. I won't do it." She expected resistance, arguments about empire and legacy. Instead, the twins exchanged one of their wordless looks, and Jae retrieved a laptop. "We've been planning the transition for 2 years, he explained, showing her spreadsheets of legitimate investments. Waiting for the right moment. "I'm the moment?" Betty asked. "You're everything," Min corrected. Betty threw herself into the legitimization with the same intensity she'd once applied to surviving their games. She restructured their holdings, negotiated with the Yakuza boss who'd been circling their territory. Not through threats, but through strategic partnership that left everyone richer. The Japanese Don respected strength, and Betty wielded spreadsheets like weapons. When FBI surveillance appeared, she used her Harvard credentials to negotiate immunity for the twins in exchange for information on their international competitors. Clean slate, legal empire, future. Naomi arrived on a spring morning, tiny and perfect with a crown of black hair. In the hospital room, watching both twins cry over their daughter, Betty felt the final piece of their twisted story click into place. It didn't matter whose DNA she carried. She was theirs. All of theirs. For 2 perfect years, they built their empire of light. Tech investments, real estate, venture capital. The Kang name became synonymous with innovation instead of intimidation. Then came the morning Betty found Naomi's room empty, the window open, and a single note on the pillow. "You took my future, I took yours." The daycare director's trembling voice on the phone turned Betty's blood to ice. "Mrs. Kim, I'm so sorry. 3 men, they had paperwork. They said—" Betty hung up. No screaming, no tears. Those would come later, after Naomi was safe. She found the twins in their office, already mobilizing. Phones ringing, men assembling. An army preparing for war. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the chaos. Jae-min turned, rage and fear warring in his eyes. "Betty, they took our daughter. I know what they took." She moved to the desk, studying the map they'd spread out. "And I know who took her. Your underboss, the one you've been investigating." Jae-sung's jaw clenched. "We'll level every building he owns. That's exactly what he expects." Betty's finger traced a route on the map. "He wants you angry, reckless. He wants the Kim brothers to come in with guns blazing so he can trigger the trap he's prepared." The twins stared at her. This wasn't their Betty. This was someone new. "He doesn't expect me." She looked between them. "The American wife, the teacher, the weakness he thinks you have." "Absolutely not," Jae-min started. "You taught me to read people." Betty's voice was steel, to notice details, to think 10 steps ahead. "You taught me your language, your culture, your world. You think I wasn't paying attention?" Jae-sung shook his head. "Betty, this isn't our daughter." The words stopped him cold. "My baby, you've protected me for 4 years. Now let me protect her." The warehouse was exactly where Betty knew it would be. She walked in alone, unarmed, hands visible. The underboss smiled from behind his desk, Naomi sleeping in a carrier beside him. "Mrs. Kim, how maternal of you." Betty's eyes never left Naomi. "You made a mistake." "Did I?" He leaned back. "Your husbands are probably surrounding this building right now. They're at your headquarters, seizing your accounts, arresting your men." Betty's smile was cold. "While you're here, playing kidnapper." His confidence flickered. "You're bluffing." "You thought I was decoration." Betty moved closer, something pretty they kept. "You didn't bother learning about me, but I learned everything about you." She reached the desk. Her hand found the gun Jae-sung had taught her to use, taped underneath exactly where she'd told their inside man to place it, including where you'd take my daughter. The shot was clean. Professional, no hesitation. When the twins burst in 60 seconds later, they found Betty holding Naomi, the baby still sleeping peacefully, the underboss dead at her feet. Jae-min reached for her, but Betty spoke first. "Is it done? His organization completely dismantled?" Jae-sung's voice held awe and something deeper. "How did you?" "You taught me." Betty finally looked at them, tears streaming now. "Both of you." Jae-min took Naomi gently, checking her over. Jae-sung pulled Betty close. "You're not ours to protect anymore," he whispered against her hair. "You're our equal." That night, sitting in their living room with Naomi safe between them, they made the decision. No discussion needed. They all simply knew it was over. The criminal life, the threats, the violence, they went completely legitimate. Tech empire, real estate, clean money. 7 years later, their family had grown. 4 children, 3 parents, 1 unbreakable bond. 7 years had transformed everything. The Manhattan penthouse now sprawled across an entire floor, filled with the beautiful chaos of 4 children who knew nothing of the darkness that had brought their family together. Naomi, at 7, had Jae-min's sharp eyes and Betty's quick mind. The 5-year-old twins, Elliot and James, possessed their father's competitive spirit, constantly challenging each other at everything. and 2-year-old Iris, the surprise that had made their family complete, ruled them all with dimpled smiles and absolute tyranny. Betty stood in the corner office of Park Industries, legitimate now, built on tech innovations and real estate ventures that bore her strategic fingerprints on every deal. As CEO, she'd taken the twins' underground empire and transformed it into something that made headlines for innovation rather than whispers. Jamin, as CFO, had channeled his financial genius into ventures that didn't require laundering. Jae-won, as COO, had discovered that his gift for reading people translated beautifully into managing thousands of employees who actually wanted to work for him. "Mommy, why do you have 2 daddies?" Elliot asked at dinner that night, spaghetti sauce decorating his face as Naomi rolled her eyes at her brother's messiness. Betty looked at her husband's, Jamin's hand covering hers on the table, Jae-won bouncing Iris on his knee. "Because my heart was big enough for both of them, and their hearts were big enough to share." "Do you ever regret it?" Jae-won asked later, after the children were asleep, the question hanging in their bedroom like it did sometimes. "Never," Betty said, her hands finding both of theirs. "But I regret that it started with force. What we built after, that was choice. You bought my debt. I chose to stay. There's power in that difference. You saved us as much as we saved you," Jae-min said softly. Vulnerability still rare but precious when it appeared. From the window, the city spread below them like conquered territory. 4 children slept down the hall, carrying their legacy forward. An empire stood on legitimate foundations, built by 3 people who'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens brings you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes love doesn't follow rules. Sometimes 3 hearts build something stronger than 2. Sometimes darkness transforms into light. And sometimes a debt paid in full becomes a love that lasts forever. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to drop a comment telling me what you loved most about Jamin Kang and Jae-won Kang and Betty Lindsay's journey. Thank you for watching, besties, and I'll see you in the next